A vanished chef, a secret ingredient. Wolfe smells more than just sauce. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Your comments always make my day. Let's begin. If you had told me that noodles could make a man cry, I'd have said you've been hitting the cooking sherry. But Tuesday morning proved me wrong. It started like any other day, with Fritz preparing lunch, me clearing a pile of mail that didn't interest Wolfe, and Wolfe himself buried behind his desk, nursing an orchid like it was a wounded sparrow, and he was Florence Nightingale. Then came the doorbell. I gave it a second ring to see if Fritz would bite. He didn't. So I got up and answered it. The guy on the stoop looked like his tie had taken him hostage. Tall, stooped, thin as a celery stalk. Early 50s, maybe older if the world had been hard on him, which, judging by the crow's feet around his eyes and the way his coat had given up on fitting him properly, it had been. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked, voice raspy like he hadn't spoken much since disco died. "That's me," I said. "And you are?" He hesitated like he hadn't settled on a name yet. Then, Kenneth Jessup. "I was told to come here. I need to speak with Nero Wolfe." I held the door open. He didn't look dangerous, more like someone who'd lost a few arguments with life. Still, I kept my eyes sharp as I led him through the hall, past the smell of Fritz's lunchtime masterpiece, duck with black bean sauce, if my nose was guessing right, and into the office. Wolfe didn't look up. He was nestled in his oversized throne of a chair like a Roman senator after a heavy meal. When he spoke, it was with the slow, exact tone that meant he didn't want his morning rhythm broken. "Archie." "Why?" "Mr. Kenneth Jessup," I said. "He's got a face like a guilty conscience and says he needs to speak with you." That got Wolfe's eyes up. Barely. He gestured to the red leather chair. "Sit," he told Jessup. "Speak." Jessup sat like the chair might bite him. He took a handkerchief from his coat and dabbed his forehead. "It's about my uncle, Carmine Cirillo. He passed away last Thursday." "My condolences," Wolfe said without a drop of emotion, "but I am neither a mortician nor a priest." "I know," Jessup said quickly. "But what he left me, it's strange. He gave me this envelope before he died. Told me not to open it until after the funeral. Said if anything ever happened to him and I opened it, I should bring it to you. No one else." That, I admit, got a flicker from Wolfe. His eyelids twitched, which for him is like a scream. "What is in the envelope?" he asked. Jessup pulled a thick manila envelope from inside his jacket. "A letter and a recipe." Wolfe's left eyebrow climbed about a quarter inch. Jessup placed the envelope on Wolfe's desk like it might explode. Wolfe didn't move to open it. "A recipe for what?" I asked. Jessup turned to me. "Noodles. Homemade. Cirillo noodles. Well, it's complicated. Uncle Carmine used to run a small trattoria on Mulberry Street back in the 50s. Casa Cirillo. He made one dish, tagliolini con burro di limone e alloro, that drew people in from all 5 boroughs. "That's lemon butter and bay leaf," Wolfe muttered. "Ridiculous combination." Jessup managed a weak smile. "That's what most chefs said. Until they tasted it. He never wrote it down. Kept the recipe in his head. Even my aunt didn't know it, but apparently he finally did write it, just before he died." "You say this is strange," Wolfe said, finally shifting to open the envelope. "You'll need to do better than culinary nostalgia to command my attention, Mr. Jessup." Jessup looked suddenly older. "I think someone killed him for that recipe." Now that got Wolfe to stop short. He didn't blink, but he didn't unfold the letter either. Jessup leaned forward. "The night before he died, he told me someone had been in his house. Nothing was stolen, but he felt watched. He said someone asked him about the noodles 2 weeks earlier, a man in a white coat. But he wouldn't say more, just laughed and said, "They'll never get it from me." Then 3 days later, he was dead. "Stroke," they said. "Convenient," Wolfe murmured. I asked, "You got a cause of death on paper?" Jessup nodded, but it was fast, too fast. "I'm telling you, something's off, and the only name he gave me, the only instruction, was to bring this to you." Wolfe opened the letter, unfolded it with the care of someone handling ancient scrolls. He read silently for 30 seconds, then a long pause. Finally, he spoke. "Archie, we are taking the case." That stunned me. Wolfe wouldn't chase down a killer over a recipe unless the killer had spilled wine on his Persian rug on the way out. "I don't understand," I said. "You haven't even—" "Jessup," Wolfe cut me off, his voice crisp. "You will stay at a hotel of your choosing. You will not return to your uncle's house. You will not speak of this to anyone. Archie will be in touch with you tomorrow." Jessup looked stunned, but nodded and stood. After he was gone, I said, "All right, spill it. What's in the letter?" Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He set the page down and reached for the recipe. "Archie," he said, eyes narrowing at the handwriting. "There is something in this formula no cook would write." "You mean it's a forgery?" "I mean," Wolfe said, "that whoever wrote this knew more about betrayal than they did about noodles." I gave him a slow grin. "So, who's hungry?" He scowled. "Not for food." The second Jessup closed the door behind him, Wolfe reached for the bell cord with a decisiveness that could have summoned thunder. Fritz answered, drying his hands on a towel, looking mildly insulted to be pulled from his sauce. "Fritz, I require your palate." Fritz blinked. "Sir, you will prepare these noodles precisely to the instructions written here," Wolfe said, passing the sheet over. "Do not improvise. Do not embellish. Use only what is listed." Fritz accepted the paper like it was an alchemical formula. "Of course, sir." Wolfe waited until he was gone, then turned to me. "I want to know everything about Carmine Cirillo, his trattoria, his family, his patrons, and most critically, his enemies. Start with the obvious. Who would kill for a recipe?" "Plenty of folks in this town," I said. "You've eaten at Rivalries. I'd kill to get their marinara. But you're thinking this goes deeper." "Yes," he said flatly. "The formula is absurdly imbalanced, yet contains elements of culinary chemistry not commonly understood. Whoever wrote it was masking something. Perhaps an ingredient, perhaps an intention. Either way, it is not merely a recipe." "So what do you want me to dig into first?" I asked. Wolfe tapped the letter Jessup had brought. "There is a line here. If you're reading this, it means I've finally lost the battle I started years ago. That implies this has a long tail. I want that tail found and braided." I left him to his fermenting thoughts and hit the phones. First stop, a few of my regulars at the licensing bureau. By the time I got downtown and flashed my grin at the right file clerk, I had what I needed. Carmine Cirillo had shuttered Casa Cirillo in 1961. No bankruptcy, no debt, no legal spat. Just closed. Like a magician disappearing mid-act. A little more legwork got me the address in Brooklyn where Cirillo had lived until he died last week. A one-story stucco place near Brighton Beach with a cracked concrete path and a mailbox that looked like it hadn't held a letter from anyone living in decades. The woman who answered the door had steel-gray hair and sharper eyes than mine. "You're not from the paper," she said before I could speak, "and you're not selling windows. That means you're either police or trouble." "I've got the shoes of a cop but the soul of a poet," I told her. "Name's Archie Goodwin. I'm looking into Carmine Cirillo's death." Her gaze narrowed. "He died of a stroke. That's the word. But someone thought otherwise." His nephew, she, shook her head. "Ken's got too much nostalgia. Not enough sense. Carmine was old. He was tired. He'd been quiet for years. He made his noodles. He read his books. He hated television. Did he have enemies? I asked. Everyone's got enemies. Carmine's just didn't find him interesting enough to keep trying. Ever hear of anyone asking about his recipe? She gave me a long look, then pushed the door open wider. Come in. The inside smelled like lemon oil and the ghost of roasted garlic. She led me to a sunlit kitchen where an old photo sat framed on a windowsill. Carmine, younger, smiling in a chef's coat, holding a platter of pasta like he'd discovered the cure for boredom. My name's Teresa. I used to help at the trattoria. He was a genius, but stubborn. Always said recipes were a trap. If you needed to write it down, you didn't know it. And yet apparently, he wrote this one down. Her eyebrows lifted. He did. I nodded. Right before he died. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, then someone got to him. You think he was coerced? I think he was afraid. I pulled out my notepad. Of who? She walked to a drawer and opened it. Inside were 3 identical white business cards, stacked neatly. No logo, just a name. Giovanni Brand. And beneath it, culinary consultant. They came around last summer, she said. 3 men in suits. Said they were researching lost recipes for a luxury food brand. Giovanni Brand. I thought they were investors. But Carmine, he threw them out. Said they were parasites. Said they were trying to poison art. I pocketed one of the cards. You know if they came back? Number. But Carmine got quiet after that. Started locking his doors more. He stopped going to the market. The week before he died, I found him in the kitchen crying. He said he'd made something he wished he hadn't. And no one else saw the recipe? If Carmine wrote it down, she said, then someone got under his skin in a way no one ever had. I thanked her and left, my mind spinning around the white cards and the sudden emotional collapse of a man who'd spent 60 years guarding a bowl of pasta like it was Fort Knox. Back at the brownstone, I walked in just as Fritz was setting down a plate in front of Wolfe. The aroma hit first, warm butter, citrus rind, and the earthy hush of bay leaf. Wolfe regarded the dish the way a scholar stares at a heretic manuscript. He tasted, then again. Then leaned back, his expression unreadable. I sat down. Sir, it is a dish, he said. Nothing more. But, he tapped the recipe. The ratio of starch to fat is delicately wrong. It is engineered not for flavor, but to preserve something. A delivery system. There is something in this dish that was not written. My mouth went dry. Poison. Not necessarily, but something intended to pass the palate unnoticed. I nodded. You want Sol Panza? Not yet, Wolfe said. Tomorrow you will call on this Giovanni Brand. You will smile and shake hands and see what they are selling. And if I get offered lunch? Decline it, Wolfe said. You don't know what you'll be swallowing. He reached for a bottle of beer, then paused, looking at me sideways. Archie, do not underestimate nostalgia. It is the most dangerous spice. The next morning, after a breakfast of ham and eggs that Fritz insisted would fortify me against deception, I suited up and made my way to the address on the Giovanni Brand business card. The place was nestled in a converted warehouse in Soho, complete with frosted glass doors, brushed steel signage, and that special blend of industrial chic that told you the rent was criminal and the coffee had cardamom in it. A receptionist greeted me with a kind of smile that practiced itself in mirrors. Blonde bob, blood-red nails, and a nameplate that said Trina. She wore the scent of ambition and just enough disinterest to make me feel like an unscheduled dental patient. Giovanni Brand is by appointment only, she said before I'd even finished my sentence. I handed over one of Wolfe's embossed cards, the one he keeps for special occasions when he wants the name Nero Wolfe, consultant to do the heavy lifting. Trina's eyes flicked from the card to me. I'll see if Mr. Dorset is available. Dorset, it turned out, was the man behind the curtain, or one of them. He arrived 10 minutes later, tall, slick, and dressed in a charcoal suit so finely tailored it might have been sewn by monks. He had the gleam of someone who knew how to sell and the voice of someone who practiced closing deals in the mirror. "Archie Goodwin," I said, offering my hand. "I represent Nero Wolfe. You might have heard of him." "Of course," he said, not missing a beat. "Your name came up during our research. We admire Mr. Wolfe's work. He's discerning." That wasn't the word most people used, but I let it ride. We walked past glass walls and minimalist decor into a conference room that smelled faintly of rosemary and toner. On the table was a glossy trifold brochure featuring phrases like "reviving culinary heritage" and "elegance through authenticity." "We source lost and endangered recipes," Dorset explained, handing me the brochure like it might sprout legs and walk. "Our clients want exclusivity, depth, a connection to the past. We give them that." "Funny," I said, flipping through it. "Because a friend of mine's uncle just passed, and he happened to own a recipe you folks tried to get your hands on." Dorset's face remained cordial, but the corner of his mouth twitched, just a hair. "Are you referring to Mr. Cirillo?" "That's right. We reached out to him last summer," he admitted. "We heard rumors of a dish that had no equal. Of course, Mr. Cirillo declined, emphatically. We respected that." "Funny," I said. "He didn't seem to think it was very respectful. Said someone was trying to poison art." Dorset smiled tightly. "We don't poison anything, Mr. Goodwin, except mediocrity." It was a good line, maybe even rehearsed, but there was something under the polish, something a little too rehearsed, a little too calm, like he'd learned to pass a lie the same way Cirillo had learned to pass butter and bay leaf. "We're not accusing anyone of anything," I said, "but it would help us to know who else you approached about this recipe. You see, Mr. Cirillo left something behind, and now someone's very interested in it." He leaned forward. "I'll be honest, we aren't the only ones after it. That dish, the tagliolini, it's not just culinary nostalgia, it's reputation. We have a backer, European, very powerful. He thinks the recipe could launch an empire. Empire of noodles? Empire of taste," Dorset said, but Mr. Cirillo wouldn't play ball. He was philosophical. "That tends to happen when you know what you're worth," I said. He nodded. "We've moved on. We're now focused on Eastern European dumplings. Same principle. Heritage, emotion, exclusivity." I pocketed the brochure. "If you think of anyone else who might have been interested in Cirillo's little masterpiece, give us a ring. Wolfe gets cranky when information hides under napkins." On my way out, Trina smiled at me again, this time with a little curve at the corner that suggested more curiosity than courtesy. I gave her a wink and left before she decided to ask how I liked my dumplings. Back at the brown stone, I found Wolfe where I'd left him, ensconced in his chair, arms crossed over his girth like a Roman consul sentencing a cabbage to exile. "Well?" he asked. "Giovanni Brand came calling last summer. Dorset's the face. Charming, sharp, oily. Says they backed off, but they've got a financial angel with a taste for legacy dishes. Claim they're chasing Slavic pierogi now." Wolfe grunted. "Diversion." "Thought so too. But here's the bit that caught my ear. He said they weren't the only ones interested." Wolfe opened his eyes fully now. "Ah, so the circle widens." "And tightens," I said. "Because if multiple people were sniffing around Cirillo's stove and he ends up dead the week he finally writes the thing down, well, that's not coincidence. That's seasoning." Wolfe nodded. "Did you learn the backer's name?" "Number, but I saw Dorset flinch when I mentioned Cirillo's poisoned art comment. I think there's more there." "I don't doubt it." He leaned forward, pressing his fingertips together. We are at the intersection of appetite and ambition. That is a dangerous place. Saul will look into Dorset's backer. You, Archie, will return to Cirillo's home tomorrow. Teresa? She is credible, Wolfe said. But she is also emotionally invested. There may be letters, drafts, invoices, something material that bridges the trattoria to this present enterprise. And if someone's been there already, then we are already late, he said. As if summoned by a conductor's baton, Fritz entered carrying a silver tray with tea, not beer. Wolfe took the cup, sniffed it, and made a face. Insipid. Then why drink it? Because, Wolfe said, my disgust reminds me to stay vigilant. I let him sip and left the room, already planning tomorrow's return trip to Brooklyn. I didn't know yet who had gotten to Carmine Cirillo, or how, but I knew one thing for certain. Somewhere between a forgotten trattoria and a corporate tasting room, someone had decided that a man's life was worth less than a bowl of noodles. And that meant they'd made a mistake, because Wolfe didn't take kindly to bad taste. The next morning, I put on a sport coat that could pass for harmless and headed back to Brighton Beach. The weather was muggy in that particular New York way that makes the air feel like overcooked cabbage. As I walked up Carmine Cirillo's cracked pathway, I kept one eye on the street behind me. Wolfe had a theory that watching the watchers always tells you something. So far, nobody tailed me, unless they were better than Saul Panza, which would take divine intervention. Teresa opened the door before I could knock. You came back, she said. That means Mr. Wolfe thinks this matters. Everything matters to Wolfe, I said, stepping inside. But some things matter more when they smell like someone's hiding a bay leaf under the floorboards. She didn't smile. Today she looked harder, like she hadn't slept. Her eyes flicked to the window twice before she poured us coffee. Strong, black, no sugar. He was afraid at the end, she said, leading me toward the back room. Not of death, of being used. He hated the idea of becoming a label, a commodity. Dorset and his people were selling heritage, I said. They just forgot the part where heritage includes the human being attached to it. She opened a narrow linen closet and pulled out an old cookie tin, one of those rusted pastel numbers with a fake Dutch windmill on the front. This was behind the cabinet, she said. He must have stashed it there recently. I didn't go through it. I figured you would. I set the tin on the kitchen table and opened it. Inside, a small stack of letters, 3 Polaroids, and a folded page torn from a guest book. The handwriting on the letters matched the scrawl on the recipe Wolfe had examined. Neat, forceful, but with tremors in the curves, age or anxiety, maybe both. I skimmed one quickly. It was addressed not to Jessup, but to Claudio Montini. The name hadn't come up before. Who's Montini? Teresa exhaled slowly. A former partner. Briefly. He helped Carmine open the trattoria in '54. They split after 2 years. Carmine said Montini wanted shortcuts. Cheaper butter, dried herbs, and less soul. I turned the guest book page around. There, in thick blue ink, was a signature. Claudio Montini, under a date marked just 3 months ago. The address listed was Westchester. Apparently old ghosts didn't just vanish. They circled back for another helping. I took the Polaroids out and laid them on the table. One showed Carmine and a younger man standing in a restaurant kitchen, likely Casa Cirillo, judging by the tiled backsplash and the copper pans. Another showed 3 men in suits I didn't recognize, shaking hands with Carmine out on the sidewalk. The last photo hit harder. It was recent. Carmine in his worn cardigan, looking straight at the camera with a tense, unsmiling expression. Behind him, barely in focus, stood a man in a white coat. It wasn't medical. It was culinary. I slid it closer to Teresa. This the guy who came asking questions? She stared at the photo, then nodded. Yes, that's him. You know his name? No, she said. But he spoke Italian. Badly. Kept asking if Carmine had ever written down his segreto di base, the base secret. Sounds like a guy who wasn't after flavor so much as formula. I gathered the letters and photos, tucked them into my inside pocket, and promised to return them when we were done. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe looked up from a book on heirloom legumes, long enough to nod at the tin I placed on his desk. He read the top letter in silence. His expression didn't change, but I could tell the wheels were turning by the way his thumb tapped the edge of the page. Once, then twice, in perfect rhythm. Montini, he said, rolling the name around like an unfamiliar varietal. Saul is already on him. He now operates a catering outfit in Scarsdale. Successful, though not innovative. Sounds like he's finally getting those shortcuts he wanted. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But this, he held up one of the letters, was written with guilt. Listen, I never wanted it to end this way. I wanted them to remember us. But you were right. I was too eager. I should never have copied it. I should never have given it to them. Montini gave someone the recipe. He gave them something, likely an early version, or what he thought was the full version. But Carmine had held something back, a crucial element. Like how to make it taste like something worth killing for. Wolfe didn't answer. Instead, he lifted the Polaroid of the man in white. He held it to the light, then placed it under his magnifier. I waited, resisting the urge to breathe too loud. Finally, he said, "This man has a monogram on his collar. JR, that narrows it down to only everyone born in the 20th century. I have asked Saul to focus on Italian-trained chefs who arrived in New York within the last 2 years and had contact with boutique culinary firms or recipe acquisition startups. We will know his name by morning." I nodded. "So what's our next step?" Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Now we wait." "Wait?" "Yes. For pressure. Whoever wanted the recipe likely knows Carmine wrote it down. They may not know he gave it to Jessup. But if they suspect, they will act. And when they do, we must be ready." "You want bait?" I said. "Exactly. You're going to use Jessup?" "I'm going to appear to use him," Wolfe said. "You will make it known discreetly that the recipe is being authenticated, that Wolfe is involved, that the note exists and may soon be published. Then we observe. And when someone tries to stop it, we know who wants it most." I sighed. So we're fishing. "Yes," he said, settling back in his chair. "With noodles." That evening, while Fritz served grilled guinea hen over wilted greens, Wolfe allowed himself 2 sips of Riesling and 1 eyebrow's worth of satisfaction. The trap was set. The bait was visible. All that remained was to see which hungry ghost from Carmine Cirillo's past would step forward to steal a flavor only one man had truly mastered. And if they thought Wolfe would let them take it without paying the bill, they had another thing coming. By Friday afternoon, I dropped just enough hints to start a forest fire in the right circles. A well-placed conversation with a food columnist over lunch at the Lambs Club, a deliberately careless remark to a sous chef friend at the Algonquin, and a quiet, anonymous message sent to the inbox of Giovanni Brand's media liaison. Wolfe's bait was marinated and on the grill. The next morning, it sizzled. At 8:42 a.m., Jessup called, voice tight with panic and still full of sleep. Someone broke into my hotel room. I was already out of bed and halfway into a shirt. "Start from the top. I got back from dinner around 10 last night," he said. "Everything was fine. But when I woke up just now, the door was still locked and my bag was open. Not rummaged, arranged. My coat, my notebook, even my toothbrush. They'd all been moved." "Was anything taken?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But the envelope with Carmine's letter and the recipe, that's missing." My mouth went dry. "You left it in your hotel bag?" "I thought it was safe." I didn't say what I thought, which was that trusting a Manhattan hotel room with a piece of evidence in a criminal scheme involving a valuable secret was like locking your savings in a lemonade stand and asking the wind not to touch it. "I'm on my way," I said. I made it to the Belmont Hotel in 35 minutes, which in Manhattan traffic is either a miracle or a sign of the apocalypse. Jessup's room was on the 7th floor, standard corporate beige, unoffensive furniture, and the faint scent of someone else's aftershave. He looked pale and rumpled, holding a paper cup of coffee like it was a crucifix. "Who else knew you were here?" I asked. "No one. Just you and Wolfe." "No calls to anyone? No emails?" "Only one. Yesterday evening. A man from Giovanni Brand left a message at the desk. He asked if I'd be willing to meet with a culinary legacy consultant. Said they were prepared to make an offer." "What did you say?" I didn't respond. "Congratulations," I said. "That was your audition. They wanted to see how close you were to the flame." I checked the door. No visible signs of tampering, no scratches on the lock, no forced frame. The manager said no staff entered the room overnight. Either someone had a copy of the key or someone was already in sight. "You're not staying here tonight," I told Jessup. "Pack your things and get out the back. I'll get you a safe location." I don't have much money. Don't worry about it," I said. "Wolfe has a slush fund for foolish clients." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair with his eyes closed, but I didn't buy the idea that he'd been asleep. I briefed him on the break-in, and he took it all in with the stillness of a chess player watching the opponent finally make the blunder he'd been waiting for. "So they know the letter exists," I said, "and they know Jessup had it, but they don't know that you have a copy." "Correct," Wolfe said, opening his eyes. "The original was always bait. The true record is in my files." "Then we've still got leverage," he nodded. "But we must act before their confidence grows." A moment later, Fritz came in with a message that had been delivered by hand. I opened the envelope. Inside was a white card, no stamp, no sender, just a name and a time. Claudio Montini, Saturday, 6 p.m., Dorset's Kitchen, Soho. Wolfe took it, studied it, and placed it gently on the desk. "A summons?" he said. "Or a trap?" "Possibly both," he replied. "You will go." "Of course. Alone, I assume." "Not entirely. Saul will follow." "I figured," I said. "Montini wants to meet at Dorset's Kitchen. That's a statement." "Indeed. It suggests that Montini and Dorset are no longer merely acquaintances. They are collaborators." "I'll wear my polite shoes," I said. "But if anyone tries to feed me noodles, decline them," Wolfe said, with vigor. That evening, dressed in charcoal gray and with a polite grimace ready to go, I arrived at Dorset's showroom kitchen in Soho. The lights were low, the atmosphere staged, long shadows on brushed steel, candles in shallow bowls, and something simmering on the back burner that smelled like childhood and lies. Montini was already there. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a chef's coat so clean it could have been bleached by angels. Standing beside him was Dorset, his smile fixed like lacquer. The kitchen was otherwise empty. "Mr. Goodwin," Montini said, with a faint Italian accent that sounded imported. "You received my card." "I did," I said. "It wasn't very chatty." "I hoped you would be curious," Montini said. "I assume Wolfe sent you." "He sends his regrets." Montini nodded solemnly. "I wish I could have spoken to him directly. He has a rare mind." I got straight to it. "You stole a recipe from a dying man and tried to market it through Brand." Montini looked genuinely pained. "It was never about theft. Carmine and I were partners. What he created, we created. He just forgot that." Dorset folded his arms. "No one's profiting yet, Mr. Goodwin. In fact, we were hoping to avoid lawyers. If Wolfe has the recipe, and we suspect he does, we'd like to discuss an arrangement." "Funny," I said. I don't remember Wolfe accepting buyouts. Montini took a breath. Let me explain. Carmine's recipe is more than food. It's emotion, memory. He captured something in that dish. Something we've been chasing for decades. And if we get it right, it won't just be on a plate. It will be in every high-end hotel and private tasting across Europe. And the man who made it, I asked, where does he go in that plan? Montini said nothing. Dorset cleared his throat. We'll pay, he said. We'll include attribution. We'll name the dish after him. No thanks, I said. Wolfe doesn't barter in sentiment. Dorset's smile slipped. Then you'd better make sure nothing happens to the only copy. I kept my voice even. What copy? He didn't answer. Neither did Montini. I turned to leave. Enjoy your nostalgia, gentlemen. I hope it tastes better than regret. Outside, Saul was across the street, leaning against a lamp-post. I gave him a signal. No interference. No need yet. But we were close. Closer than they knew. Back at the brownstone, I delivered the exchange word for word. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I was done, he said, "Prepare for a gathering." The office? He nodded. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Call them all. Montini, Dorset, Jessup, Teresa. They've all touched this dish in one way or another. It's time we served the truth. I grinned. You going to make them eat their words? No, Wolfe said. I'm going to make them understand that stealing flavor is not the same as creating it. He leaned back and closed his eyes. And in the end, he murmured, the palate cannot lie. At precisely 11 a.m. on Sunday, the office at the brownstone filled like a theater before the first act, curtained in tension, perfumed with anticipation, and lined with a cast of people who had no idea what part they were about to play. Wolfe was in his chair, motionless as a mountain. The only thing moving was his right index finger, tapping the armrest once every 5 seconds, as though keeping time for an orchestra that hadn't started playing yet. I opened the door to usher in the last arrival. Claudio Montini, dressed in another immaculate chef's coat, looking like he'd slept poorly but still clinging to dignity like a garnish. Behind him was Dorset, composed and blank, a man trying to look like he belonged anywhere but here. On the couch sat Teresa, holding her handbag with both hands like a prayer book. Next to her, Jessup looked equal parts anxious and confused, tugging at his collar as if it were in on a conspiracy he hadn't been told about. I closed the door and took my spot near Wolfe's desk. Wolfe waited until the silence was so complete you could have heard a bay leaf drop. Then he spoke. "Mr. Jessup," he began, eyes closed, "you have done precisely as I expected. That is, you allowed yourself to be compromised. You failed to secure the document your uncle entrusted to you, and in doing so, you brought pressure upon this house. I do not appreciate that." Jessup opened his mouth, then closed it again. Wolfe didn't wait for a response. "Fortunately, you lost only the decoy. The real record is in my possession, protected and beyond reach. Which brings us to the reason you're all here." He opened his eyes, finally, and they locked directly on Montini. "You, sir, attempted to reclaim something you once helped create. But you misunderstood your contribution. You brought utility, technique. Carmine brought vision. You left when you could not bend him, and when age and isolation softened his defenses, you returned, not to reconcile, but to profit." Montini bristled. "That's not—" "You wrote him letters," Wolfe continued, raising a hand. "You appealed to memory. But memory, Mr. Montini, is not a currency you can spend twice. You gave a partial copy to Giovanni Brand. When that proved insufficient, you came seeking the true formula, but Carmine had withheld the key ingredient." Montini glanced at Dorset, who remained perfectly still. "The problem, Mr. Dorset," Wolfe said, pivoting his attention, "is that you mistook cuisine for conquest. You surrounded yourself with consultants, branded nostalgia, and attempted to market something you could neither understand nor reproduce. You have no proof, Dorset said coldly. No? Then allow me to correct that. He nodded to me, and I opened a folder from Wolfe's desk. Inside were 2 documents, Carmine's original handwritten recipe and a lab report Wolfe had quietly commissioned from a discreet chemist Saul knew on the Upper East Side. I held the second sheet aloft. This analysis, I said, shows trace elements of asafoetida, a pungent, resinous spice native to Iran and sometimes used in old-school Italian cookery in microscopic amounts. It wasn't listed in the written recipe, but it's present in the noodles Fritz made according to the original document. Wolfe spoke again. That ingredient changes everything. It is not merely aromatic, it is emotional. The tongue recalls it without registering it. And that, Mr. Montini, is what Carmine never told you. He built the recipe around an illusion. Without that single, precise note, it is nothing. Teresa let out a soft breath, almost a sob. Jessup sat straighter. But here is the more damning fact, Wolfe said. You did not just covet the recipe. You pursued Carmine. You sent men to pressure him. One of them, he turned a photo on his desk to face Montini, was seen with him just days before his death. Montini stared at the photo. It was the one from the Polaroid, the man in the white coat behind Carmine. His lips tightened. He had a stroke, Montini said weakly. He had a fear-induced collapse, Wolfe countered. There is a difference. No court would convict you of murder, but I will name the moral verdict plainly. Your obsession frightened an old man to death. Montini looked away, jaw clenched. Wolfe turned now to Jessup. And you, nephew or not, were not chosen because your uncle trusted you to protect him. You were chosen because he knew you had no ambition. You would not sell him. You would not exploit his memory. You would carry it like a child carries a shell, unaware of the sea inside. Jessup looked like he'd been hit with a soft brick. I almost felt sorry for him. Then Wolfe gestured to Teresa. She, in the end, is the only one who behaved with honor. She stood watch, not for profit or legacy, but out of love, and it is she who shall decide what becomes of Carmine's creation. Teresa stared, startled. Me? Yes, Wolfe said. The choice is yours. Destroy it, donate it, publish it, lock it away. I will give you the sealed copy. I will destroy mine, but understand this. Once it leaves your hands, it belongs not to memory, but to appetite. Teresa swallowed, her fingers tightening around her handbag. Then she nodded. I'll take it, she said, and I'll bury it with him. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Wolfe leaned back, a satisfied huff escaping him. The matter is concluded. Mr. Goodwin, please show our guests out. I escorted them one by one. Jessup left with dazed gratitude. Teresa with quiet dignity. Dorset didn't speak. Montini paused at the threshold. I didn't want to hurt him, he said. I looked at him. You didn't want to get caught. There's a difference. When the door clicked shut behind them, I returned to the office. Wolfe was reaching, deliberately, ceremoniously, for a bottle of beer. He poured a glass, sniffed it, and took a measured sip. Then he said, I loathe sentimentality, but I admire restraint. Poetic, I said, for a guy who just solved a crime using pasta and psychology. He didn't smile, but his eyes had a gleam. Dinner tonight, he said, will be tagliolini. No secrets. Just flavor. I nodded. And what's for dessert? He lifted his glass. A clear conscience. I could have said something clever, but for once I let him have the last word. The brownstone had returned to its natural state. Quiet, well-ordered, and properly insulated from the treacheries of the outside world. Wolfe was back to his orchids. Fritz was humming in the kitchen while deliberating between 2 mushroom varietals. And I was at my desk wondering if Noodlegate had finally reached its end or just taken a nap. But peace in Wolfe's domain is like whipped cream on a souffle, elegant, temporary, and prone to collapse. At 3:17 p.m., the collapse rang the front bell. I answered. Standing on the stoop was a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a conference on elite hospitality. Slim, tan, mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair slicked back like he was about to cut a ribbon at a Michelin ceremony. He held a briefcase, wore Italian loafers that had never seen a sidewalk, and spoke with the faintest trace of continental ambiguity. "Mr. Goodwin," he said smoothly, "I'm Jean-René Bachelet. May I speak with Mr. Wolfe?" My internal radar flared. The name hadn't surfaced during our background work, but it hummed with significance. I gave him my "it depends" look. "What about?" "The matter of the Cirillo recipe," he said, smiling. "I believe it's come to my employer's attention." I took my time answering. "And who's your employer?" He opened his briefcase. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a bottle of wine. Burgundy, vintage, older than me and definitely more expensive. My employer would prefer to remain unnamed, but he has a very specific culinary interest. You might say, a proprietary one. "Ah," I said, "he wants to own nostalgia." I believe he sees it as investing in legacy. "Sure, and I'm investing in beachfront property on the moon." Bachelet chuckled. "Mr. Wolfe will find this worth his time. I promise I didn't answer, just closed the door, walked back into the office, and gave Wolfe the pitch, bottle, and all. Wolfe regarded it like a snake that might be venomous but potentially delicious. Bachelet, he mused. French accent with German posture and Roman grooming. That will be Geneva. "Geneva?" I asked. "Anonymity, authority, and enough money to fund sentimentality at scale. Likely an umbrella investor. One of the culinary syndicates trying to corner exclusive recipes for high-end licensing. I read a paper on it last year." "So we're past New York now." "Yes," Wolfe said, "which makes me wonder why we haven't yet seen the tail of this dragon. Want me to let him in?" Wolfe considered it. "Not yet. Let him wait. Patience, like appetite, must be tested to reveal its limits." I returned to the hall and told Bachelet that Mr. Wolfe was considering his offer. "I'll wait," he said, as if it were a spa treatment. He did too. 47 minutes. No fidgeting, no complaints. When I finally brought him in, Wolfe was seated like a Buddha with indigestion, arms resting heavily on the chair, expression unreadable. "Mr. Bachelet," Wolfe said without rising, "state your case." Bachelet inclined his head. "My client is prepared to offer 6 figures for exclusive rights to Carmine Cirillo's recipe. He will honor the Cirillo name, maintain artistic control, and ensure global placement. He does not want conflict, merely the chance to preserve and elevate." "To elevate what?" Wolfe asked. "A man's dying thoughts? A legacy he explicitly tried to keep, hidden." Bachelet smiled faintly. "To elevate an experience. Mr. Wolfe, cuisine is emotion, and emotion can be refined." "That is a fallacy," Wolfe said. "Emotion cannot be bottled. It can only be evoked. Carmine understood this. You do not." Bachelet's eyes narrowed. "You have it." "I have what?" "The original." Wolfe said nothing. His silence was louder than my entire wardrobe. "You could name your price," Bachelet said, "and ensure its survival." "That is not my purpose," Wolfe replied. "You mistake me for a broker." "Everyone's a broker, Mr. Wolfe. The difference is whether you name your price out loud or in silence." That got a faint snort from Wolfe, his version of throwing a drink in someone's face. "You're wasting your time," Wolfe said. "The recipe will never be published, packaged, or presented under false pretenses." Bachelet straightened. "Then allow me to warn you, not as a threat, but as a courtesy. There are others who will not accept that decision. People for whom legacy is less precious than the profits it shields. I am unconcerned." "You should be," Bachelet said. That was enough for me. I stepped forward. You've delivered the message. You can leave. To his credit, he didn't argue. Just closed the briefcase, nodded once, and walked out as if we'd gifted him the dignity of losing. Back in the office, Wolfe reached for a beer, this time early and with emphasis. "That man," he said, "is the edge of something unpleasant. He said others won't accept Teresa's decision. Then others will be disappointed." I leaned on the desk. "Do we warn her?" "No," Wolfe said. "She has more fortitude than they assume. But we will prepare." "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said. "We secure the original permanently. And we see if our dear Mr. Panzer can trace this client of Bachelet's. If we are to be dragged into international appetites, I would prefer to know the name of the mouth doing the biting." I left him to brood, filed the wine in the cabinet we use for bribes we won't drink, and called Saul. The circle was widening again, this time beyond restaurateurs and memory merchants. Now it was business. And that, Wolfe always said, was when the food turned sour. By Tuesday morning, Saul Panzer had done what Saul Panzer always does, cut through smoke like a cleaver. He met me at a diner in Midtown where the eggs were undercooked, the coffee was bitter, and the booths were just private enough for criminal confessions or quiet revelations. We got the latter. Saul wore his usual, gray suit, quiet tie, and that air of deliberate invisibility that made him the most efficient bloodhound in New York. He sipped his coffee without grimacing, which confirmed again that he had no taste buds, only information. "Bachelet's employer is real," he said, and loaded. "His name's Otto Linz. Swiss industrialist. Made his money in precision engineering, then moved into luxury acquisitions, art, rare books, culinary heritage. Let me guess," I said. "He's building an empire. Wants to open a boutique culinary museum/experience in Zurich. Visitors pay $5,000 a head to taste forgotten masterpieces. He's already acquired a lost Moroccan spice blend and the original brining chart from an Austrian monastery kitchen. And now he wants a noodle recipe from Mulberry Street." Saul nodded. "Through Bachelet, he's tried to buy over a dozen family-held recipes. 4 accepted. 2 resisted. 1 got mysteriously sued for improper custodianship and lost everything in court. So he's not just rich. He's aggressive, very, and he doesn't like being told no." I paid the bill and left a tip big enough to confuse the waitress. Back at the brownstone, I delivered the report. Wolfe was inspecting the root ball of a dendrobium orchid with the same attention I'd seen him give to suspects under verbal cross-examination. "Otto Linz," Wolfe repeated, a name like polished metal. "He's already lost once," I said. Teresa shut the door. "Then he will try to open a window. I'd like to bolt it before he gets a foot through." "Agreed," Wolfe said. "The question now is what means he'll use. Legal, persuasive, or illicit?" That question got its answer faster than I expected. At 4:10 p.m., Teresa called. "I think someone followed me," she said, her voice tight but not frightened. "A man in a grey car. He parked across from my apartment this morning. I left for the market, came back, and he was still there." "Did he approach you?" "Number, but he watched me the whole time. Didn't even pretend not to." "You're sure it wasn't press?" "He wasn't holding a camera. He was holding a pen. I told her to stay indoors and promised I'd be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived, the grey sedan was gone, but Teresa was at the window still watching. I scanned the street. Nothing obvious. But a mailbox nearby had fresh scuff marks. A parked van 2 spaces down had a smudge on the inside windshield, left by someone who'd been watching for too long. I entered the building, and Teresa opened the door before I knocked. "Same man who showed up last month," she said. "After Carmine died. Asked polite questions but wouldn't leave. Said he was a culinary historian." I didn't need Wolfe's chair to know what that meant. "Linz is getting restless." Teresa offered tea. which I declined. Instead, I took out a padded envelope. "We need to move the original," I said. "It can't stay here." I was planning to bury it. "That was when we were dealing with dreamers," I said. "Now we're dealing with buyers. And buyers don't take kindly to things going off the market." She hesitated. "Will Mr. Wolfe keep it safe?" "He'll keep it buried deeper than Fort Knox. And if anyone tries to open the vault, he'll bury them under logic and contempt." That earned me a faint smile. She handed over a sealed envelope, then looked away. "I feel like I failed Carmine," she said. "You didn't," I said. "You did the hardest thing. Preserved him. Everyone else tried to use him. You stood still." I returned to the brownstone with the envelope in a locked briefcase. Wolfe accepted it with ceremonial gravity and placed it in the wall safe behind the etching of Les Quatre Saisons. Then he poured himself a beer and sat down with a grunt that meant satisfaction or indigestion or both. But peace didn't last. That night our phone rang at 11:38 p.m. Fritz had gone to bed. I answered. "Goodwin." The voice was clipped, accented, and as warm as dry ice. "This is Jean-René Bachelet. I hope I'm not disturbing your sleep." "Too late for that. You want to get to the point, or should I find a pillow?" "I'm calling as a final courtesy. Mr. Linz will be arriving in New York tomorrow. He does not enjoy disappointment. That makes two of us. I hope you understand the value of what you possess." "I do. It's just not for sale." There was a pause. "I hope you also understand that some doors do not stay closed forever." "I know. That's why Wolfe reinforced them." I hung up before he could recite another cryptic proverb. The next morning, Saul called. "Linz is here. Checked into the Carlisle. Full staff. Security detail. He's scheduled a private dinner tonight at Giovanni Brand's test kitchen." "Montini?" "No longer in the picture. Word is, Dorset's out too. Linz's people are bringing in their own chef. Rumor is they're going to recreate the Cirillo dish using the partial notes Montini gave them and serve it to investors. To a food critic from Le Guide Européen. That did it. Back at the brownstone, I laid it all out. Wolfe listened while chewing slowly on a slice of cucumber Fritz had brought him. "They're going to counterfeit it," I said. "Pass off a forgery as the real thing." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but they will fail." "You're sure?" "They are missing the core, the asafoetida, and they do not know what they are missing. The human mind does not register that flavor consciously, but the tongue remembers." I nodded. So, Wolfe said, "we allow them to humiliate themselves. You want them to fall on their own soufflé?" "Precisely. Arrange for Mr. Jessup and Teresa to attend the tasting. As Carmine's heir and custodian, they shall serve as witnesses. You will go as my proxy." "And if Linz makes a move?" Wolfe's eyes glinted. "Then I will remind him that some legacies are not for sale, and some flavors are not meant to be stolen." That night, the trap wouldn't require bait. Just silence, and the certainty that counterfeit cuisine tastes like nothing at all. The test kitchen at Giovanni Brand's Soho location had been transformed from a space for experimentation into a theater of ambition. There were soft lights, minimalist floral arrangements, a table set with no more than 6 seats, and the unmistakable perfume of desperation masquerading as refinement. I arrived early, suited, shined, and carrying Wolfe's authorization letter in an inner pocket in case I needed to declare ecclesiastical authority. Jessup showed up next, looking like a man who regretted every decision he'd ever made, including his haircut. Teresa followed shortly after, composed as always, with her handbag clutched under her arm like it might contain judgment itself. Bachelet greeted us at the door, his smile untouched by sincerity. "Mr. Goodwin, Ms. Romano, Mr. Jessup, welcome. You are most welcome." I returned the grin. You always this enthusiastic before a train wreck? His eyes twitched just once. Then he turned with practiced grace and motioned for us to follow. Inside, the stage was set. A tall man in crisp whites stood at the open-concept cooking station, French, probably, with the slick competence of someone who knew how to sear meat and egos with equal skill. A small camera crew hovered discreetly in the corners. No lights, no flashes, just quiet lenses capturing every sprinkle of salt and dart of saffron. In the center of the room sat Otto Linz. He wore a gray suit tailored so sharply it could have filed documents. His hair was silver and perfect, and his expression belonged on a coin or an indictment. He didn't rise, but he nodded at us with the casual confidence of a man who assumed everything in the room had already been paid for. "Ah," he said, "the Americans." "Careful," I said, pulling out a chair. "We might start singing the anthem." Jessup muttered a nervous laugh. Teresa didn't react. Dinner began with a few palate amusements. A dab of foie gras here, a whisper of smoked eel there. Little edible distractions. Then came the centerpiece. The dish. Tagliolini con burro di limone e alloro. I knew it the moment it hit the air. The scent was there. Lemon butter, soft bay, a touch of cream that didn't belong but somehow pretended it did. But something was off. Subtle, but off. Like a song played half a note too flat. The texture was glossy, the plating perfect, the aroma almost convincing. But the flavor, when I took a bite, fell apart like a lie told twice. Jessup didn't finish his plate. Teresa took a single bite and set her fork down. Linz watched them carefully. "Thoughts?" he asked. Jessup cleared his throat. "It's very close." "But not close enough," Teresa said quietly. Linz turned his gaze to her. "You're the one who served at Casa Cirillo." "I was," she said. "And this isn't it." The chef stiffened slightly but kept stirring something at the stovetop. "Would you say it lacks execution?" Linz asked. Teresa shook her head. "Number 8 lacks memory." That hit harder than a slap. Linz's eyes narrowed. Carmine Cirillo was a man of emotion. He left no records. "Except one," I said. The room froze. Bachelet's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" "He left one written recipe," I said. "Not for you. Not for anyone to license or bottle or sell in a Paris boutique. He gave it to his nephew and entrusted the moral right to protect it to someone who loved him." Linz spoke softly now. "That's illegal obstruction." "No," I said. "That's legacy. Something you don't get to auction." Linz leaned back, face hard as granite. "We're offering to preserve it." "No, you're offering to possess it. You think you can buy emotion, then dress it in satin and charge admission. But you can't. Because the thing you're missing, what Carmine kept out on purpose, can't be tasted. It can only be felt." He didn't answer. Across the room, one of the camera crew looked at another. They both glanced toward Linz. The chef stopped plating. Bachelet turned away, fiddling with a wine glass. Teresa stood, calmly. "You've all had your try," she said. "You have the photo, the notebook, the stories. But you don't have the man, and without him, you'll always be one taste away from the real thing." She turned to me. "I'd like to go now." We left without waiting for dessert. Back in the car, Jessup exhaled. "They're going to try again, aren't they?" "They'll keep trying," I said. "But it'll never work. Because Carmine's secret wasn't just in the ingredients." Teresa looked out the window. It was in his silence. That night, back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the full account. Every word, every twitch, every failed bite. He listened, arms folded, eyes closed. When I finished, he said, "And they will persist." "They will. And they will fail." "Every time." He nodded once. "Good." I turned to leave, but he stopped me. "Archie." "Yeah?" He opened his eyes. In a world where everything is for sale, it is vital that something remains sacred. Even noodles. He scowled. Especially noodles. Fritz came in with dinner. Wolfe reached for his bear. I took my seat and raised my fork. Outside, the world was still bargaining. But inside the brownstone, the meal was real, and it was enough. The brownstone held its silence like a held breath. The storm outside, of culinary ambition, of theft draped in legacy, of foreign men in tailored suits and false reverence, had passed. Or at least it had moved on to some other coastline, hungry and frustrated. Inside, it was Tuesday evening. The orchids were watered, the books were shelved in their precise, alphabetical dignity, and Wolfe had just finished his third bottle of Remmer's beer. I was at my desk, pretending to reread a report that I'd already filed twice. The truth was, I was waiting for Wolfe to say what I knew was coming. He'd held off for 2 days, letting the taste of vindication ferment in private. But eventually, he always delivered the vintage aloud. It came not with a proclamation, but a sigh. A civilization that cannot distinguish between essence and embellishment, he said, will eventually choke on both. I looked up. That today's commentary, or something you've been saving for a rainy day? He waved a hand. It applies. Carmine Cirillo understood it. The men who hounded him did not. They mistook aroma for memory and technique for soul. And paid $5,000 a plate for it, I said. There's something poetic about that kind of failure. Wolfe gave me a rare nod. One of those deep, ponderous ones that suggested he might be feeling something resembling human emotion or indigestion. With him, it was hard to tell. What happens now? I asked. To Teresa? To Jessup? She will return to her modest apartment and continue to remember Cirillo as a man, not a commodity. She will not sell the recipe, nor allow it to be copied. Jessup, for all his shortcomings, will do what she advises. If he tries to profit from it, she will correct him. I grinned. And Lynn's? He will find another dish, another legacy to exploit. This time he was denied. But men like him never stop. They only redirect. He'll keep trying to eat the past, I said, and he will keep finding that it has already been digested. The phone rang. Wolfe ignored it. I picked it up. Goodwin. The voice was hesitant. Female. Familiar. Mr. Goodwin, this is Pauline Granick, from Gourmet Heritage Quarterly. I raised an eyebrow. Wolfe glanced over but didn't shift. I'm working on a story, she continued, about the Cirillo recipe. There are rumors, and I heard you were involved. Rumors are like salt, I said. They're useful, but overuse spoils the meal. She laughed nervously. Off the record, then. Is it true that a private dinner attempt failed? That Carmine's real recipe included an unlisted ingredient? I don't comment on proprietary investigations, I said. But I will say this. There are things in this world that don't belong on menus. There was a pause. That's a quote? Sure, I said. Print it under Mystery Man at the table. I hung up. Wolfe finally stirred. They're circling. Like seagulls at a dock, I agreed. They will write their pieces. They will romanticize failure, and they will speculate endlessly about the missing element. Do you care? No. He reached for another beer. So long as they fail to find it. And they would. Because the truth of Carmine Cirillo's final recipe wasn't in any spice, or in the ratios, or even in the handwriting that Wolfe had decoded like a Rosetta Stone written in butter and grief. The secret ingredient was trust. Carmine had given it not to chefs or entrepreneurs, but to people who wouldn't sell it. Wolfe understood that. Wolfe respected it, which in Wolfe's world was rarer than gold and less prone to tarnish. A knock at the door. Fritz opened it, and a moment later, Saul Panzer stepped into the office without ceremony. He handed me an envelope. glanced at Wolfe, and said, "As requested." Inside was a photo, a still taken from one of the hidden cameras Saul had placed outside the Giovanni brand test kitchen the night of the tasting. It showed Linz, alone after the others had left, holding the half-eaten plate of tagliolini, staring at it like it had betrayed him. "You want to keep this?" Saul asked. "No," Wolfe said. "You may destroy it." Saul nodded. "There's nothing else on him. He left New York this morning, took a flight to Geneva. Bachelet stayed behind." "He won't try again," Wolfe murmured. "He doesn't have to. He lost," I said. Saul gave a rare smile. "Then we're done." He left without fanfare. Wolfe actually rose from his chair, a rarity. He stepped to the safe, opened it, and took out a single page. The original. Carmine's letter and the annotated recipe beneath. He stared at it for a moment. Then he turned, held it over the fireplace, and set a match to the edge. The flame crawled slowly, turning history into ash. When it was gone, Wolfe turned back to me. "There. The matter is concluded." I wanted to say something clever. Maybe that he'd just burned a fortune, or that people might call it arrogance. But I didn't, because it wasn't arrogance. It was reverence. "Want dinner?" I asked. "Fritz is preparing pheasant," he said, "with a shallot reduction. No bay leaf." I followed him into the dining room, the scent of roasted bird already meeting us at the threshold. The world outside would go on arguing about legacy and taste and truth. But in here, things were simpler. Dinner was dinner. And Wolfe, bless him, was finally hungry. It was a week later, and I was back at my desk with my shoes on the edge and my chair tilted just far enough to irritate Wolfe if he happened to glance up from his latest stack of proof pages. He didn't. Fritz was in the kitchen roasting marrow bones like they owed him money, and the brownstone was doing what it did best, keeping the outside world exactly where it belonged. Outside. The Cirillo affair, as it had already come to be called in food circles, was over. No more calls from journalists, no more shady emissaries sniffing around Teresa's building. Otto Linz had quietly shifted his gaze elsewhere. Word was he was now pursuing a centuries-old custard formula from Andalusia, which sounded easier to steal and harder to romanticize. Bachelet had vanished into whatever European mist he came from. Giovanni Brand issued a statement claiming the event had been a test kitchen prototype, not a public debut, and that authentic heritage remains our guiding philosophy, which is the kind of sentence that sounds good printed on parchment and rolled into a wine bottle, then tossed into the sea. Jessup went back to teaching night classes at a community college on Staten Island, reportedly with a new appreciation for silence. Teresa returned to tending her corner of the world with the recipe sealed away. Not literally buried, but out of circulation. She'd chosen to keep it alive only in memory, where no trademark could reach it. And Wolfe? Wolfe had done something I hadn't seen him do in years. He let it go. He didn't publish an essay, didn't pen a letter to the Times, didn't mount a philosophical tirade about cultural theft or the commodification of taste. He simply burned the recipe and moved on. It wasn't restraint. It was justice. Delivered not in courtrooms or headlines, but in quiet choices made by people who understood the difference between having something and deserving it. Around 5 o'clock, I stepped into the kitchen and snagged a bite of something involving anchovies and green olives. Fritz didn't slap my hand, which meant he was in a good mood. When I returned to the office, Wolfe looked up. "Archie." "Yeah." He steepled his fingers. "Tell me truthfully, was it good? The dish?" "Yes." I thought back to the tasting, to the counterfeit version, beautifully plated and hollow as a lie, and to the real thing which I'd tasted weeks ago under Fritz's steady hand, using Carmine's now extinguished note. "It was better than good," I said. "It was real, and it's gone. Wolfe nodded once, gravely. "There are flavors," he said, "that only exist when their creators do. To preserve them artificially is not tribute. It is embalming." "You sound almost poetic," I said. "I'm annoyed," he replied, "which in my case is very close." A silence settled, comfortable and full. Then, as if by universal agreement, the dinner bell rang. We rose, Wolfe slower than me, but with his usual dignity intact. At the table, Fritz served risotto with morel mushrooms and a side of fennel salad. No fanfare, no bay leaf, just food, honest and unrepentant. Wolfe took a bite and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he said, "Do you know what I admire most about Carmine Cirillo? His temper, his wisdom. He understood something essential, that not every creation is meant for the world. Some things must be held, not shared, remembered, not consumed." I raised my glass. "To things worth keeping." He raised his. "To things that can't be taken." We drank. Outside, night was falling. Inside, the world held steady, for now. And I, Archie Goodwin, was once again reminded that justice doesn't always wear a badge or swing a gavel. Sometimes it wears an apron, leaves no fingerprints, and disappears the moment you taste it.